And welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of College Football with Sam. Today's going to be obviously a shorter show with bigger things coming this week, and I want to apologize for not being on Sunday, but my schedule was just very bonkers that day, and really it was a weekend that was really weird. For example, Saturday, I woke up at 7:30 a.m., and then I went to bed the following morning at 4:30 a.m. Just very weird day. Had some homework and school things to take care of, so just didn't go live yesterday. Didn't think I'd mention anything of it. Figured that I could, go live today at 6 p.m. Eastern time, as I always say that we're supposed to, but sometimes we don't meet that. We'll be live tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time as well, as is planned. Today is a shorter slate, but I'm willing to take your questions in the form of super chats. I'm going to give you new updated record predictions for Oregon, Indiana, and Alabama. I actually only changed these predictions by about a game, really, for each of them. In fact, I flipped one game for Oregon, Indiana, and Alabama, which direction we'll figure out here. And yeah, that's really all I did. And then my playoff rankings, didn't get them out this weekend, but they'll be out this week. Also wanted to talk a little bit about Deion Sanders, just because that was in the news today. I genuinely thought he was going to come to the podium and say that he was going to step down for health reasons. Not in the cynical way that a lot of people thought, where, his kids are off, of Shiloh and Shadur, and then, a very close friend of the family that, Deion Sanders considers family, and Travis Hunter's gone. A lot of their talent left. That was their NFL talent right there, along with some of their receivers. They have a lot of turnover this year, and he obviously has had some pretty serious health conditions, one of which being bladder cancer that he revealed today. And I just kind of thought to myself that and this is obviously before he revealed that he had bladder cancer, got his bladder removed. I thought to myself that, you know what? I, of course, would prefer him not to step down, but it kind of makes sense. He's not healthy, and if he can't be around the team all that much, why would you be the head coach? Just leave. I see in the comment section in the live chat we have some Go Big Red. Go Big Red, Saray and Taylor Slots, and also Jude Hansen. Nebraska is a team that we'll be talking a bit about this week. One of their position groups, and also some of my impact players that I'm paying attention to for Nebraska this season. So, honestly, really appreciate you guys for coming in. Obviously going to be a shorter show. Hey, Justin Ziegler, it's good to see you in here. I hope, getting back to what we're really starting off with today, I hope that Deion Sanders is at Colorado for as long as reasonably possible. And I say that because of what he was able to do with Hunter and recruiting him, and obviously what his son Shadur Sanders did in college. I don't think he's going to be an awesome NFL player. Thought many overrated him in college, but he was still a good quarterback. Obviously his kid has his genes, but he has Jordan Seaton on the O-line, and Seaton was a 5-star out of high school. He's a stud offensive tackle. And while they don't recruit very well at the high school level, they do selectively get some blue chippers and some really talented players. I mean, think of Julian Lewis, who might start at quarterback this year, to where I can see that if, say, I don't know, Colorado finds a donor who's very interested in football, that they could be a fun team to watch consistently, and consistently be an average good team that maybe some years, if they're able to get investment, and I don't know much about Colorado, I'd speculate they wouldn't get a ton of investment in football, but what if they did? It'd be kind of fun to see a coach with Deion's, I don't really care, nonchalant style, of just being, pretty open, and again, not caring much of what the media has to say, and honestly, too, not, to a certain degree, cares a lot about his players, but it also comes across like, to a certain degree, he, like they're all his players. It just is what it is. If you're not a fit in his eyes, he's not gonna baby you or anything like that. So I'd like to have him around for a long time. It's kind of, it's not the exact similar reasons, very different reasons actually, why I like the idea of Texas Tech buying all of these players. It's interesting. It's a shakeup. It's an upset of the natural order here. This is why I'm not necessarily opposed to Texas just spending a ton of money on their roster. As someone who didn't follow football closely in the 2010s, I didn't really know anything about it, but I knew of it. My parents always went to state games, so I had an idea of what was going on here and there. Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson, and then at some points Georgia, because Georgia under Kirby Smart in the late 2010s was always talked about. It's tiring. It is tiring having those same teams over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, not just being good, because I actually like the idea of all of them at least being good, but for them to be elite year over year over year over year, it's tiring after a while. I will tell you as a Michigan fan right here that even though the biased part of my brain would love Michigan to go 15-0 every year, the objective analyst part of me would get sick of it after a while. Like if Michigan, let's say if Michigan 3-peated or 2-peated, there would be a part of my mind that would say, okay, I want to see someone new win the national championship. So that's kind of my view of college football. I like a little bit of chaos here and there, a little bit of upsets, not too much. Like I would hate to see a MAC team win the national championship. I just would, for example. It'll never happen, thankfully, but I would hate to see that. It wouldn't compute with my brain. But it's fun seeing some of these smaller power brands, teams in the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12, and teams that were formerly a part of the Pac-12, the now rebranded, or if you don't care about the rebrand, the defunct Pac-12 as it once were. I love seeing those teams believe in themselves, believe that they can win something big, that they have a future, and invest in themselves and try to attract investment and try to really buy themselves into a new tier. Think of what SMU did. They saw the writing on the wall. They thought that they could be a player at the national level. They bought into themselves, believed in themselves, and they bought their way into the ACC. And power ratings-wise, were the second best team in the ACC last year, only behind Miami. Now, Clemson technically, of course, had a higher ceiling, but Clemson also lost to Louisville in quite humiliating fashion at home. Well, I think SMU, they went on the road and beat Louisville. I forget, but just with the money they have, the fact they tried to get Chris Del Conte to be their athletic director, and he's the athletic director at Texas, viewed by many as the best AD in the country, they believe in themselves. And I think that down the road, they are going to field a better teams plural, than they did last season. That's why I like Texas Tech. I think that while Colorado maybe doesn't have the same backing, definitely doesn't, that Texas Tech and SMU do, and probably doesn't have the same backing that a lot of other schools do, Colorado has clearly, under Deion Sanders, believed in themselves. And in a way, I think last year they overachieved a little bit, at least relative to my expectations. It's not like they were this amazing team last year, but they won 9 games, and they found some impressive ways to win, and they destroyed a lot of the inferior, truly bad football teams that they struggled against the year prior. And I don't know, it would be fun to not see them fall off, I guess. I'm actually, as a person who didn't exactly necessarily like them in 23 or 24, because in my mind they were just a 2-man show and it was a whole circus. Now that things have calmed, and now that many people thought I was wrong for viewing Shedeur Sanders as this overrated player who wasn't a college football elite, certainly not an NFL one, and having actually been correct there, he's gone. Hunter, it would kind of have been cool if Hunter had stayed, but you're not going to pass up the opportunity that he had. He's a freak athlete, someone I personally liked. I didn't think he deserved the Heisman, but I understand it because the type of play that he showcased, the stamina especially, was beyond impressive. I'm now rooting for Colorado to succeed. Doesn't mean I think they will. I don't think this team is a solid Big 12 contender, which means it's probably not a good team. An average one, an above average one maybe. And I'll actually do a Colorado record prediction that's in my works. I'm going to cover I think it's the Rocky Mountain or the Boulder Showdown. I forget what it is. This is me showing that I don't exactly know all of my college football history. But let me see. Rumble in the Rockies. That's what it is. We're going to be covering the Rumble in the Rockies teams. So a Utah prediction and a Colorado prediction sometime in the next 2 weeks. Utah is a team that, sneak peek, I have winning the Big 12 for a variety of reasons. It's hilarious in the sense that every year I have picked Utah to be a very good team. In the past 2 years, they haven't. But when you look at their roster, their offensive line, the fact that they have a quarterback no longer named Cam Rising who doesn't have injury concerns. I mean, Devin Dampier ran himself into 1,000 yards and didn't really get hurt. And they added players through the portal that I really like and didn't really lose many good players. And they're old. It's a roster littered with seniors and juniors. Whittingham wanted, I think, to retire after last year, but he didn't. And his reasoning behind that was he finished poorly, and he did not want to leave Utah as a 5-7 team. So you also have the motivating factor for the head coach. Whittingham has this, I think, juxtaposition in his head. This, these two poles, where on one pole he wants to retire and move on in life. He said he didn't want to coach at age 65. Well, he's 65 going on 66 now. In fact, he might be 66 already. But anyway, there's the other pole where he wants to leave Utah in a great place for the head coach in waiting, Morgan Scalley, his defensive coordinator. So you have that motivating factor. It's actually two motivating factors. If I succeed, and I want to succeed very badly and further cement my legendary status, then I can retire. And you have all of these old players. You have an upgraded staff with a better OC, a much better quarterback. I think Utah's strength and conditioning has always been awesome and will remain to be the case this year. They could field the best O-line in college football. Not picking them to because they do have some talent limitations and they're not going to be playing elite competition in the same way that a Penn State, Oregon, Notre Dame will have a tougher schedule than Utah. I don't think the SEC, outside of really Florida, if I'm being honest, or maybe Texas, Alabama, or Georgia at the end of the year, not at the beginning. Don't think many of those teams have elite O-lines, but they play tough schedules and they're more talented than Utah there. But Utah could. There's a world where the Big 12 is that conference that's closer to a G6 conference now than the other Power 4 conferences. They're closer to, I think, honestly, they're closer to probably, I don't know what the strongest G5 conference is, so I'm not going to speak on it, but intuitively, I think they're closer to the G6, or what once was the G5 when it was stronger than it is now, than they are to the current Big 10, SEC, or even ACC, because at least the ACC has Miami and Clemson at the top, and a team in Florida State where if Florida State gets a coach, because I don't think Norvell will do this, or maybe he will, maybe he'll change. If Florida State gets a better coach or Norvell changes, all of those teams can have rosters with more, top 100 players than 2 stars, for example. And the Big 12, outside of maybe Texas Tech, if they continue to recruit an insane level, doesn't have any of that. So it's hard to field a unit that's the best in America. But Utah can do that with their offensive line. They absolutely can do that. I would say that the only comparable unit to that perhaps might be Texas Tech's defensive line. Starting defensive line. Not depth, but starting defensive line. Tech could field the best starting D-line in college football. Again, wouldn't pick it, but it's certainly possible. So that's something to pay attention to that I'll be covering in the future obviously. Let me answer some more questions. And then after I answer to some of these questions, it'll only be Super Chats that'll answer, and we'll get to my Oregon, Indiana, and Alabama predictions. Okay. I heard that Gunnar Katula did really well in day one of fall camp, better than Elijah Pritchett. Per Wilson Dittman Sports. Okay, so I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I mean, me personally, not to throw shade at any other channels, but I've heard some things from trusted people. I'm just gonna say like the entire I've heard from like the entire Corn Crazed server, and just previous drama that Wilson Dittman Sports is not exactly a trustworthy source. So I'll just leave it at that. But to continue on with the rest of your comment, Jude Hansen, I actually myself have found to believe that Nebraska's offensive line is going to be very good. They're deep. I think their interior is proven. Tackle is a bit of a concern, but I think that they have talent there. So if Raiola coaches these kids up well, or really now a lot of them are young men. Like Spindler is entering year 5, and Pritchett is kind of middle age, upper age for college eligibility, because I think he's a junior now, so he's toward the end of his eligibility. This O-line is deep, deeper than Frost offensive lines. It's deep for a Nebraska offensive line. Is it one of the best in America? I personally don't think so, but I think it's going to be good. It wouldn't shock me if this was a top 25 offensive line this year. Okay, Justin Ziegler asks, any word how Underwood is doing into fall camp? No, and I still have to catch up on Big Ten Media Days. I really have to. I know that it happened last week, and that quickly passed us, but I have to catch up on that because I'd like to, watch everything and take notes on it, at least some notes. I'm going to try and report on all of that tomorrow. Just give all of my takeaways from watching the coaches speak, because watching the players speak, the players aren't going to say anything bad about their roster, because they're all peers with each other. So that would, that could cause division, could sow discord. The coaches are in positions of authority, so I trust them more than anything else, and I want to listen to all that they have to say, jot down a few notes, a few takeaways. And also, I don't want to put too much stock in it at the same time, because I've made moves before where I remember entering, I think it was 2023, I pegged Minnesota 6-6, and then I watched Minnesota's spring scrimmage and listened to Fleck talk, and I convinced myself that they were going to be a really good team, and they weren't. And my initial prediction in the winter was more correct. So sometimes you don't want to take too much stock in what the team, of course, is saying about itself, and more just so the evidence on the field, what they've produced on the field, what they've produced in recruiting, in coaching, listen to their actions, not their words type thing. I will say, though, that I have people that I respect that have told me that based on how they've listened to Brent Venables, for example, at his media appearances or at SEC Media Days, they basically think that he knows that this is about to end, that it's done. So, pretty long-winded introduction, and a video featuring Bald Father Betts is going to release. I might release it tonight, might release it tomorrow morning. Sometimes I overthink when I have to release my videos. But it'll be released sometime in the next 16 hours, I would say. And him and I talk about how Oklahoma recruiting right now is just an abject disaster. I mean, I've been listening to Ohio State fans understandably get frustrated with their recruiting. They're still top 10, and they're top 10, top 5 in quality. And they have a coach in Ryan Day who's a proven winner with only his players on the roster. I mean, look at... even in like 2020, even in 2022, when you still had some Urban Meyer players, but most of them were already gone. Like most of those players were Most of them were days. It was the same thing in 21, too. Like, really, for much of the 2020s, because Ohio State's just that much of an NFL factory. So players, until really recently with Ohio State, haven't stayed there for, more than 3 or 4 years if they're really, really good. The starters at Ohio State. Day has had his players at Ohio State for a while and has continued to win with them. Venables has had a lot of his players that he's either selected in the portal or whatnot, but some of them were Riley recruits. He's held on to bits and pieces, not much, but bits and pieces of Riley's staff. Like, I know Beatonbaugh is still there on the offensive line, coaching the offensive line. He has his players now. It's year 4. Last year he had a lot of his players, and last year was a disaster. And this year, the starting roster looks good. I love Oklahoma's defense, but I have a lot of questions about the offense. A ton of questions about the offense. And I also have a lot of questions about their future. I mean, right now, they would be 6th in Big 12 recruiting rankings. If you looked at the Big 12 as it existed from 2012 to 2022, the 10-team Big 12, the Big 12 that didn't have a conference championship game for a long time because NCAA rules prohibited it unless you had 12 teams or more, they would be in the bottom half of that Big 12 in recruiting. And they don't have many big players on the board left. They're going to be going after 3 stars and 2 stars for the rest of this cycle, as Jim Nagy has said. It's insane. It's crazy. And Baldfather Betts and you should all follow his channel, by the way. You just search it up on YouTube. Baldfather's one word and then space Betts. You'll find his channel. Gives wonderful betting advice if you're into that thing. I'm not, at least yet, but if I ever decide to, it would be following his college betting because he just wins over and over and over and over and over again. Like, that's his mantra, and he does this stuff for free, and more importantly, he does it for fun. So him and I are going to be, we taped this on Saturday, but it'll be up either tonight or tomorrow, talking about recruiting, the new NIL landscape, also taking a little bit of a victory lap on the fact that we did not think that restricting what players could be paid could be upheld, and it's not. The executive order doesn't change that. And most of you, I presume, saw the headline, of course, that dropped about a week ago or a few weeks ago. I feel like an idiot, but did you have Nebraska at 8 or 9 wins? I had them at 8. Jude Hansen. Originally, I was going to pick them to go 7-5, but I decided against it. I could not look at the rosters that I saw and objectively pick them to lose to Minnesota. I couldn't do it. It would have been one thing if Minnesota was starting a more proven quarterback and, had better performances on the offensive line the previous 2 years and returned more, but we don't have those things. So I picked Nebraska to win 8 games. I'm telling you, though, that Cincinnati game, that's going to be a 1-score game. So Nebraska better have a ready kicker, and they better have some plays that they can draw. They better not take that game as, we're favored by 7.5 points. We're definitively the better team, because they should be. But Cincinnati was banged up last year. They were, injured, and they fell apart pretty quickly because of those things. But they're healthy, and even if they suffer those same injuries again, they're going to be healthy in week 1. So, Jude Hansen also asks, are you going to be at the Nebraska versus Michigan game? Probably not. Probably not, sadly. Hopefully, next year is the year that I can go to games pretty regularly. Just, I don't have the money right now. Any word how Underwood is doing going into fall camp? Have absolutely no idea. It does sound like there's still like a, pretty legitimate quarterback competition at Michigan. I'd imagine it's between Keene, if he's healthy, and Underwood. If Keene isn't healthy, I don't see a world where Underwood doesn't start. And if somehow you get Jake Garcia or Davis Warren starting again, then the season's already over. It just is. I mean, maybe they'll still win 8 games, or if the defense is really good, maybe they can win 9 again because the schedule, not again, but 9 because the schedule is pretty easy. But you're not beating, USC. You're not probably beating Ohio State if you start Warren or Garcia at quarterback. At that point, you're probably not beating Nebraska, and you're probably not beating Oklahoma either. I don't think Oklahoma will have as good of an offense as either of those other 3 Big Ten teams I mentioned, though. I still think their offensive line is somewhat in tatters, though not to the same degree, and I don't trust Mateer at all. The step up in defenses that he will be playing is much steeper than the step up in supporting cast that he will receive at Oklahoma. So his passing numbers were not the greatest last year. Those will, I think, definitely come down. And then you have the rushing statistics. SEC defenses will figure that out pretty quickly, unless he's somehow Lamar Jackson. And he isn't. It's the opposite of Cam Ward, where Cam Ward played in a much tougher environment and conference and with a much tougher schedule than John Mateer did. And when he went to Miami, I'd actually argue his schedule got easier and his supporting cast got better at the same time. So perfect combination. You get your number 1 quarterback of America with better play calling, with a better supporting cast, better talent, another year of development, and then, of course, an easier schedule that makes some things easier. With Mateer, it's different. I do not think that he's receiving a direct coaching upgrade, like offensive coordinator, QB coach-wise. It's the same that he had at Washington State. His supporting cast is getting better, and yes, he has another year of development for sure. Those things are helpful, but that, I think, is more than canceled out with the fact that he is playing Michigan, Auburn, Texas. He is playing Tennessee, Ole Miss, South Carolina. Think about Missouri. Think about LSU, for example. I just listed 8 games right there. Just listed 8 games that Oklahoma has to play against defenses that are going to be pretty darn good. Yeah, like Michigan, Auburn, Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee. I think I forgot to mention Alabama. Alabama's defense is a top 10, top 5 unit. We'll talk about that. I think Oklahoma is actually one of those teams that is a little bit overvalued this year. Just a little bit. I think at the beginning of the year they were undervalued, but they have been one of these teams that's been infected by the hype train as time has gone on. They have. I've told you a lot of the teams that I think are overhyped. Some of them in the Big Ten, for sure. I am not buying Illinois this year at all. I think Illinois is going to have reality hit them hard in the face. I think that the way Ohio State played football this year, with all they lost in their coordinator changes, will make this team, noticeably worse than last year's team in a way that won't exactly be the same with some of the other teams that lost a bunch, outside of maybe their, fellow greater than 70% of their roster or blue chippers cousin Oregon in the Big Ten. But even then, Oregon's upgrading in talent. They just are, like across the board. Lost a lot of experience, yes, but so did Ohio State, and they have more staff continuity. So it's a little bit of a different conversation there. But if Ohio State were to play Oklahoma on the road in week 2, like for Michigan, I don't know how much I'd pick Ohio State to win by, but depending on how they would look against Texas, I don't know if I'd even pick them to win, but they will be a better team at the end of the year. And they have recruited at a very high level and developed at a very high level. And winning at Oklahoma is going to be hard for anyone to win at, especially when Oklahoma is healthy, when they haven't exactly been figured out yet, because this will be Mateer's first game against a Power 4 opponent from the Big Ten this season. And then also you got to think about how it's going to be his first time in Oklahoma with that supporting cast. Oklahoma's defense is going to be mean with all they bring back, and just winning in Norman at night when Oklahoma returns 70% of their production. So they're one of the more experienced teams in America. That'd be hard for anyone. The only teams who I think could go into Oklahoma week 1 and just absolutely beat them guaranteed would be Penn State, Clemson, and Texas. Everyone else I would have questions. I mean, even maybe not Georgia, because I think has the best head coach, and Georgia has, I think, more security and benefit of the doubt from my perspective than Oregon or Ohio State does entering this year. But even Georgia, I'd have questions with. Like, is Gunnar Stockton with that O-line and some of the questions at running back going to really hamper this Oklahoma defense on the road under the lights? And also, is Georgia's defense, with how they've performed the previous 2 years, do we know that they're going to hold Oklahoma to single digits? I don't. But I think as the year goes on, Oklahoma is going to get figured out. The tough schedule will wear on them. And look, I mean, now more than ever, experience is important. And Oklahoma has that on their side. They have it early. But they do not have depth, and they do not have a supreme talent advantage on their side either. And against that schedule, that will kill them come October, come November. There is an excellent, I think very likely chance that Oklahoma enters that Texas game 5-0, and that they finish the year 7-5, 6-6, 8-4, and no better than 8-4. There's a very good chance of that. I think against a team like Texas that the wheels will come off. And I know that I'm rambling a bit here and there, so we'll get on to this. But just to prove my point about some overvalued and undervalued teams. As for Illinois, you can't win 5 or 6 close games and only lose 1 or 2 of them and return a bunch of players that aren't NFL level, especially along the line of scrimmage, and then tell me that they're going to be a playoff contender. I just had someone tell me that Oregon being plus 340 in Vegas odds to win the Big Ten doesn't say they're better than Illinois, who's plus 4,900 to win the Big Ten. Like the same odds as Indiana, literally, who many people who believe in Illinois think is going to take a big step back in Indiana. It's just absurd. Like, of course, no, that doesn't define Oregon 100% as the better team than Illinois, but it says the likelihood of that being the case is about 99%, if not more. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. But enough with my rambling. I think it's time for me to move on and to talk about my Alabama record prediction for 2025. I have changed with Alabama after really just a week or week and a half. I forget how long it's been since whenever I thought about it, but I honestly think that Alabama is a team that I underestimated, so I want to talk about my change in my record prediction for them. I have a new record prediction for the 2025 or Alabama Crimson Tide. The last time I talked about Alabama, I picked them to go 9-3 and miss the college football playoff. 9-4 last year, 5-3, tied for 4th in the SEC. They lost the ReliaQuest Bowl. It has been more than 3 seasons. It's been 4 seasons exactly since Alabama has played in the national championship game. Actually, since they've won a playoff game. Pretty unfamiliar feeling. It's been over a year. Alabama missed the college football playoff last year. Unfamiliar feeling. I believe that the Alabama Crimson Tide are going to reach the college football playoff in 2025, which is a departure from my prior record prediction video where I picked Alabama to miss the playoffs, and I picked them to lose 3 games again. Now, I believe that the Alabama Crimson Tide could, in a world where there's a lot of 3-loss teams, they could maybe make it in at 9-3. Maybe, just maybe. But I'm going to go a step further. And I think that Alabama is going to reach double-digit wins this season. I believe in their offensive line. I believe in their defensive line. I don't quite think that Alabama is going to be, this super team, of course, but they don't have to be a super team to reach the college football playoff. If Kalen DeBoer is the elite coach that I believe he is, the Alabama Crimson Tide will reach the college football playoff this fall. And I think that's the mistake I made in my previous Alabama predictions video. Link to that will be in a reply to the pinned comment at the top of the comment section if any of you are curious. But that's the mistake that I made here. I picked Alabama to go 9-3, 5-3 in the regular season for 2025, the same regular season record they earned in 2024. And what I think I missed there is the talent, the sheer talent that Alabama has, combined with Kalen DeBoer and his staff entering year 2. So they have a much greater opportunity to impact the roster, to implement the changes needed, to continue their developmental and coaching style and impress it upon the players. And Kalen DeBoer brought in Ryan Grubb. To be his offensive coordinator, just like he was at Washington with DeBoer in 2022 and 2023. Of course, when they went 14-1, played Michigan in the national championship game, and played Michigan more competitively, I think, than the final score would exactly indicate. So that's huge right there, along with returning Jeremy Bernard, returning Ryan Williams, bringing in Isaiah Horton from the transfer portal. I love Alabama's outlook more than I did, honestly, a week ago, because an epiphany occurred to me. I forget exactly when it was, but I think it was on one of my live shows, which are Sunday, Monday, Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, soon to add on Tuesdays and maybe even Thursdays. Definitely will add on to my live show schedule when the regular season begins. Week of August 23rd. We think the season starts in week 0, not week 1, although week 0 might soon be week 1. But anyway, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here. I looked at Alabama and what they return. They return 64% of their production, which is 29th. Their preseason S&P Plus rating is a 27.9. I still think they could go 9-3, but I think that's a floor for them. If everything goes wrong, maybe 8-4, but 9-3 is the likely floor here. And they could go 12-0. Not likely, wouldn't pick it. I think realistically, though, their ceiling is 11-1, and 11-1 would probably get them to Atlanta, definitely get them a home playoff game, and 10-2, that's smack dab in the middle. So at the end of the day, I decided to side with 10-2 and pick Alabama to go to the college football playoff. That's what I decided to do here. So I'm actually going to change this up and do my predictions first, because we've already gone through the schedule. We've already gone through what they return. Just want to change it up. So I'll do that at the end this time with Alabama. As for the 10-2, 6-2 prediction, tied for third in the SEC, I think obviously that gets you into the college football playoff. And again, I think there was just this disconnect in my mind between Alabama having a lot of unproven talent and having some questions. I think the quarterback battle is somewhat of a concern and a question. I think they lost their best player on the offensive line last year. I don't exactly believe that Alabama has one of the best assistant coaching staffs in America. Coordinators are different. Coordinators are very different. I love Womack at DC, love Grubb at offensive coordinator, and then I think Kalen DeBoer is a top 3 head coach in America. Top 3. But they do have, I think, some talent and developmental questions that really stem from the end of the Saban era. But they're in year 2, so they're going to get further from that. I think they still have a good strength and conditioning staff. I believe in their recruiting. They have some good assistants, like Jamarcus Shepard is an elite assistant, for example. And they had a lot of young talent last year that returns this year. So I thought it was a little bit hypocritical and inconsistent of me to pick this team to go 9-3. They should reach the playoffs. They are a team that I definitely underrated for most of July and really until I think now, where I have them inside my top 8 rankings and not just, fringe top 10 like I did. And I'm picking them to win double-digit games. I think they'll be a better quality team in 2025 than they were in 2024. That is one of my predictions for Alabama, my mild prediction. Kept most of these the same compared to my last video, my last Alabama record predictions video, but I also changed some of them. For example, prediction number 2, which I think is medium because the schedule is tough and there are questions, but it's not a hot prediction, is that the Crimson Tide will make the college football playoff. I think for sure. Not the most confident in it, but I'm more confident in Alabama making the playoff than probably 120 or more. Actually, probably 125 because there's, 136 or more FBS teams now. There are only a handful of teams that I'm more confident in making the playoffs than I am Alabama. So I don't think it's that much of a bold, risky prediction. A hot prediction is that Alabama's defense is a fantastic unit that finishes around the top 5. It'll improve from last year for sure. Year 2, in the new scheme, in that swarm defensive scheme, 4-2-5, moving away from, Saban's 3-4, where you had more traditional linebackers there, more the Belichick Saban style defense, moving into more of the modern defenses that are meant to counter the spread. That will help a lot, and they return a ton, and I mean a ton of starters. My scorching prediction is that the Tide will lose to Georgia by 10 plus, losing to Georgia in the fall for the first time since losing to Georgia overall for the first time since 21, but the last time they lost to Georgia in the regular season was 2007. It was an overtime game in Tuscaloosa, and I think Stafford just had one play where they threw a touchdown after Alabama kicked the field goal, and it was a walk-off touchdown to Mikey Henderson. That was, I believe it was Mikey Henderson. If the I can vividly see the play right now where Georgia beat them in my mind from highlights that I've watched over and over again. The reason I say this is both teams are off a bye, but it's in Athens. This is the first time that Alabama plays in Athens since 2015. And Athens is more of a Georgia environment than Atlanta, obviously, even though typically when Georgia plays in Atlanta, they do have home field advantage, like anywhere from probably 60 to 75% of that stadium is Georgia fans whenever Georgia plays there. It's a slight Georgia home field advantage, but not the same as Sanford Stadium. And I think that Georgia will, by this time, by late September, will be better on the offensive line than they will to start off the year, and better than people think. And I believe that defensive line and defense overall is going to be very nasty. You also have to think that last year Georgia didn't have any receivers, and they hung more than 30 points on Alabama in a very short span. Really, from the second quarter to the fourth quarter, final score was 41-34. They put up 27 points in the second half. Now I know they were trailing. All they could do was throw, but it's not like they had a successful run game overall or a very successful pass game last year. And I believe that with new wide receivers and a quarterback in Gunnar Stockton, who I think is underrated, and returning their tight ends, I think that Georgia is going to not blow out Alabama. I would not pick that, but handily beat them? Yes, I would say that. And then my Hellfire prediction is that Alabama's offense is nearly as inconsistent as it was in 2024 due to the quarterback and the offensive line, which I'm higher on the offensive line than I was, but I still do not think that it will be one of the best units in the country. It will be good. It will be great. There will be moments where the talent just takes over, and if they're well coached, that will be in the big games. But I think it's spottier than a lot of people believe. Quarterback is where I have real concerns, but I believe that all those things will also be able to be mitigated by the fact that Alabama has a really damn good wide receiver core this year, and they'll make the playoffs because the offense, while inconsistent last year, I said nearly. I think it'll be a little bit more consistent. I think that the passing game will have a higher ceiling, and the defense will be better. So I think those things leads Alabama to really win 10 games this year and to reach the college football playoff. Again, their schedule: at Florida State week 1, ULM week 2, Wisconsin week 3. Off the week 4 bye, they play Georgia on the road in week 5. Vanderbilt, they host week 6. They play at Missouri week 7, host Tennessee week 8. They play at South Carolina week 9. They get a bye week 10, play LSU week 11 at home, Oklahoma at home week 12, Eastern Illinois at home week 13. Then they travel to Auburn week 14. I lean positive at running back, wide receiver, defensive line, really the entire defense. I lean positive there. Tim Keenan at defensive tackle, Qua Russo and LT Overton. Also on the defensive line at edge, Deontay Lawson's back, along with Bray Hubbard at safety. And then you have Jam Miller at running back, and then Ryan Williams, Isaiah Horton, and Jeremy Bernard at wide receiver. You got a lot of good players. And I think that the home games honestly match up well with Alabama. I don't think they'll lose at home, just like they didn't last year. And the road slate: at South Carolina, at Georgia, at Missouri, at Auburn, you could have 3 losses there. but they'll have a distinct talent advantage over all of them except for Georgia. I think they'll be better prepared for South Carolina, and South Carolina will be also worse. Missouri, they destroyed Missouri last year. There's no reason to think that that will drastically change based on the portal development staffs from last year to this year, although it probably should be closer. Auburn and Georgia, I think, are the trickiest spots. And I also think that Florida State, depending on I guess on how good Alabama's defense is out of the gate, and what Alabama's offense with Simpson looks like out of the gate, really compared to Tony White's defense at Florida State, because I think Florida State's offense is a known. They're going to be very limited through the air, have some plays to Deuce Robinson, but they're gonna run the ball, and they're going to be limited. It really, I think, depends on Florida State's special teams and defense, and then can the FSU offense get a big play or so? I think that that could be tricky, but I would still heavily favor Alabama in that game. And I think in all of their games except for the Georgia game, they will be a favorite and certainly will be the better team. And again, to rehash some of my predictions here, Alabama will reach the playoffs. They'll be a better quality team this year. The power ratings may not reflect it, but I think last year's power ratings were overinflated by the Georgia game, by high preseason expectations, and also the fact that I think FPI cares a little bit more about recruiting, a little bit more than it should, especially with how much of a game sample size we have now. I mean, if you have a top 10 talent roster, but you are just getting blown out left and right, you still shouldn't be ranked top 25, for example. I also think their defense will be certainly top 10, could be top 5. I think that they will certainly lose to Georgia and probably suffer another loss with that 10-2 record. And they will still have issues on offense. I don't think this is a national championship favorite, but can they win the national championship? Can they have success? Certainly. And I do think Alabama reaches the college football playoff. I just have an itch right here that's just really, really bugging me. But that's okay. Let's see if we have any super chats. No, we do not. Perfect. We'll move along to talk about the Indiana Hoosiers. And this is kind of heartbreaking for me because I did tie myself a little bit to my prediction that Indiana would reach the college football playoff in 2025. But all good things must come to an end. So let's begin. Originally, I had Indiana earning an 11-1 record yet again. I had them beating one of Penn State or Oregon, much more likely Oregon than Penn State, winning all of their other games, and hosting a college football playoff game. And they would if Indiana ended up winning 11 games, beating one of those big teams, because they would have earned a big win. One of Iowa or Illinois will probably be ranked when they play them, so you have an additional ranked win. Not that those really matter, but the playoff committee thinks they do. The strength of schedule would be stronger, and the strength of record would be stronger. And with the schedule the Hoosiers have, if they were to go 11-1, they could certainly reach Indy. So I had them doing these things, and I still believe actually that from a power rating standpoint, they will be a better team than they were last year. Especially they will do a better job in big games, and I believe that some of those games they had against Michigan last year or Washington or Northwestern, where they won, but you saw some holes, I think they'll be more dominant in those type of games. They will win by larger margins for sure. But I also want to throw out caution there. And I want to say, as I pull back from this prediction, I'm no longer picking Indiana to go 11-1, and that means their playoff dreams are in jeopardy. Because if they go 10-2, which the most likely result of that would be beating everyone except for Oregon and Penn State, you don't have any big win, and if you get blown out in those games, or one of them's a blowout and the other's still a loss, the committee won't want to put you in over a more talented team with a tougher schedule, likely from the SEC, but maybe even from your fellow Big Ten. Say if Michigan goes 10-2 and beats Ohio State, or if USC goes 10-2 but beats one of Notre Dame, Oregon, or Michigan. You get the point. I think that there are some limitations to this roster, and I am going to explain this before going into my specific prediction and also giving some new specific predictions for this team, not record-wise, but on a Scoville scale. So Indiana, they have it's really strange. They have this starting roster that I love. I think that it is one of the best starting casts in America, actually. I think it is that good. However, it's a big however, Indiana does not have the depth of a lot of teams around them. They do not. So in my spring top 25, which I still have to update my top 25 and talk about that, and I will. So in my spring rankings, I had Indiana 7th. I had them ahead of Miami, Michigan, Alabama, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, USC. Those teams I'll mainly talk about. They do not have better depth than any of those teams. They don't. All of those teams have much better second string and third string casts, mostly based on talent alone, but also from good development, good coaching, and experience, too. Indiana has a wonderful cast of starters. Wonderful. I actually still think, even in comparison to Alabama, and this is pretty bold, that Indiana's starting cast in a lot of ways will be better and will certainly be more efficient, will certainly play closer to their ceiling, will utilize their talents more. But, and this is where I believe that Indiana's chances against, your Oregon and Penn State are very slim. The reason I now have Indiana going 10-2, 7-2, instead of 11-1 and 8-1, is mainly because of depth and the fact that they are still replacing enough to where I do have some questions. It's not like they play Oregon at home or Penn State at home. They play them on the road. And Oregon gets a bye before that road game. And while Penn State doesn't get a bye, they're still hosting Indiana. That will probably be a hyped up game. And I ultimately think that there's talent limitations to this Hoosiers roster. And the longer the season goes on, the more likely injuries are to pop up. We saw how devastating injuries were for Indiana last year. We just did. I mean, think about Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke was much better than Taven Jackson. He was. And you clearly saw that when Jackson started against Washington, and even the second half against Nebraska, though to a lesser degree. The disparity wasn't as obvious there. You saw that, Indiana, when they had some injuries on the offensive line, that they had a huge step back. And then at the same time as that step back happened, they had to play Michigan and then Ohio State, who had the top two defensive lines in all of America, I think, last year. And while I believe they're deeper than they were last year, they still aren't as deep as they need to be to win these big games, in my opinion. Now, they can win those big games, but I'm not going to pick them to do so unless I see something different or until they do at this point, because talent-wise, they are just that far away. I still have them going 10-2, though, 7-2, and if the field is weaker than I believe it is in terms of record, this might be good enough to get them into the playoffs. But I think after last year and how I kind of think that two of these losses could go down, I do have them just missing the playoffs and going to a higher-end bowl game. That's where I have Indiana going. So let me now pull up some more details. We'll talk about what I think about Indiana again, although since I already talked about this, it's going to be not quite as detailed as last time because I don't want to bore you guys to death. But we'll go through the schedule here. Old Dominion Week 1, Kennesaw State Week 2, Indiana State Week 3, Illinois Week 4, at Iowa Week 5. Off the bye in Week 6, they play at Oregon. It's a huge game right there. Huge game, and I'll talk about why for about 30 seconds in a minute or so. Michigan State Week 8, UCLA at home Week 9, at Maryland Week 10, at Penn State Week 11, hosting Wisconsin Week 12, and off a Week 13 bye, they play at Purdue. That Oregon game is big. I think it's the biggest game outside of maybe at Iowa in Week 5. Illinois, I've already talked about this before in my prediction for that game, a very early preview and prediction that was requested to me by a viewer and subscriber of the channel. That'll be released sometime in the next 24 hours. Just haven't gotten around to it. It kind of feels weird releasing it on its own, but I'm just going to release it anyway. I talked about how I believe Indiana will probably handle Illinois, and I also think they'll probably handle Iowa. But Oregon, it's more travel. Oregon's coming off of a bye. Oregon will likely be coming off of a bye after a loss to Penn State, based on Vegas odds. So they will be angry. Indiana, if they enter, 5-0, the media will be talking them up. People will be talking them up. Lanning will be able to easily use the fact that Indiana's undefeated and Oregon is a loss to hype up his team. And more importantly than that, because that wouldn't matter if the talent were equal, Oregon has a BCR in the 70s, and at this point they have about as many 5-stars that are capable of playing ball as Ohio State. Like they are recruiting at that level. And I think Lanning has improved as a game manager. I think that they develop well. Lupoy has questions, but his worst games were against an Ohio State offense last year that when it was operating at full strength, no one could hold to under 20 points. So it's not like he's fielding this awful defense. I think Oregon will need to, improve on the defensive side of the ball from where Lupoy has been at for them to win a title, but that's a different topic. We're not talking about Oregon. We're talking about Indiana. This game's important because Indiana is old enough and Oregon is young enough to where if they're able to hang around, they can emerge with a win. And if they emerge with a win, then they're probably a lock to reach the playoffs. Because if they can beat Oregon on the road, you're not dropping a game outside of Penn State. And I don't think they'll beat Penn State. Penn State is going to be much more well-rounded than Oregon. And at that point, you're in the month of November, not early October. So depth will matter more then than it does in week 7. And it's just a bad matchup as well. I mean, Jim Knowles figured out Mike Shanahan's offense like that very quickly last season. I don't see how it would be any different here. That, I think, is the most important game in Indiana's schedule. At plus 590 to reach the playoffs and plus 4,200 to win the Big Ten, I think Oregon, or Indiana rather, is a bit undervalued there, just a bit. I still lean positive everywhere. I do. I think their staff's one of the best, and I think their starting roster is one of the best. But their team talent and depth is a limitation. And while I think 11-1 is actually realistic still, it's definitely their ceiling, and I'm not picking it because they could go 8-4, and 7-5 is the worst possible outcome. So I'm not going to pick Indiana, just not yet, to play to their team ceiling. I'm not going to do that. So I think 10-2. I think that's what Indiana is going to do this season. When I look at the amount of starting players they have that I think are first team All Big Ten caliber, second team All Big Ten caliber, some of them could even flirt with All American status. I think of quarterback Fernando Mendoza. I look at center Pat Coogan, potentially Roman Hemby. I think he had a really bad supporting cast at Maryland. Guard Drew Evans and also guard Bray Lynch. Tackle Carter Smith. Wide receiver Elijah Surratt and also Omar Cooper Jr. I love Tyreek Tucker and Dominique Ratcliffe at tackle. Michael Kamara at edge is a name that obviously you all know. Aiden Fisher at linebacker. Amari Farrell at safety. And D'Angelo Pons at corner. I mean, this is a team that, if healthy, if they game plan correctly, and if they catch a better team napping, they can, and I'd actually say probably will beat them, even if that team has much better talent. But just given the circumstance, and yes, obviously I'm picking Indiana to beat everyone except for Oregon and Penn State. Given the circumstance of those games and where they're being played at, the situation that the other team will probably be in during those weeks, I think that the Indiana Hoosiers are going to have a tough time winning those, for sure. Looking at some specific predictions for Indiana, a mild one is that the Hoosiers will go over their preseason win total of 8.5. This is not a lock, but I think it's close to a lock as you can get for a team with Indiana's talent. My medium prediction is that Bryant Haynes helps IU's defense maintain its impressive 2024 performance in 2025. So they'll finish about the same, I believe, in a variety of statistical categories, which means that they'll probably field the top 10 defense this year. My hot prediction is that Fernando Mendoza is a superior quarterback to Curtis Rourke, and I'm actually making a specific video on that prediction this week. My scorching prediction is that Curt Cignetti beats at least one ranked opponent. Probably shouldn't be this high, but given how high the media and the public is on Illinois, and then certainly Oregon and Penn State are no easy tasks, and those along with maybe Iowa are the teams that are most likely to be ranked at the time Indiana plays them. I think that Cignetti gets one of those teams, maybe even two. Won't pick Oregon or Penn State right now, but Iowa and Illinois they should beat, and Oregon, depending on Like, if Phil Steele's correct that Oregon is not a top 10 team and Indiana reloads, this is a different conversation come October 11th, for example. And my Hellfire prediction is that the Hoosiers win double-digit games in back-to-back seasons, which to my knowledge has never happened before. So given Indiana's history, that's still an extremely bold prediction. I don't quite have Indiana reaching the playoffs, but I think they are a college football playoff contender for sure. I love the outlook of this team. I love Curt Cignetti. I think the job he's doing with Indiana at Indiana is absolutely phenomenal. And I can't wait to watch this team. They don't play a good non-conference schedule, so it'll take a while for me to figure out who they are, for us to figure out who they are. But I think this is still one of the better teams in America. They're just not quite national championship caliber contenders. And a certain college football playoff participant due to some of the talent limitations. All right, now we can move on to Oregon, and then we will get on out of here. I'm going to put my dog outside because he's barking, and I don't want that to continue, so I'll be right back. If any of you do have a question you want to ask me, send a super chat, and I'll answer it right when I get back. And welcome back, everyone. Thank you for your patience. You shouldn't hear any more barking in the background. Yep. Yeah, the problem with that, Max Ellis, the problem with taking my dog to a daycare in Ann Arbor is that's 30 minutes away from where I live, if not longer, depending on traffic. So if I lived closer, man, I would consider it, but I live still with my parents as I'm not quite graduated yet. So yeah, the dog probably would have to stay here, sadly. Max Ellis said just finished saying IU will go 10-2 and miss the playoffs. Unfortunately, yeah, it's unfortunate. I want Indiana to reach the playoffs. It's actually the same with Illinois, even though I'm much lower on Illinois than Indiana. I'm high on Indiana relative to their win total and how everyone's talking about them. I might be, outside of maybe an Indiana fan, the highest person on Indiana this year. And I might even be higher than they are, just in terms of how I believe the team is composed. But I can't I can't pick them to go better than 10-2 right now. I can't do it. Now, if they are if like they go on the road against Iowa and beat them by 30, and Oregon just looks like absolute crap relative to their talent, I can revisit the conversation. But winning at Autzen is hard. Oregon has not lost at home since 2022. Since, mid-November, early November of 2022. They haven't lost at home. I don't see a reason that they'll lose at home again this year. It honestly, due to the travel, it is probably the hardest environment currently to play in the Big Ten, I would say. That's what I think. It's probably Autzen's up there. And then whether you want to put like Ohio State or Penn State at 2, I'd probably say Penn State's the tougher environment. It's just Ohio State's been better coached and fielded better teams, which also helps with the intimidation factor because everyone knows that. Whether you want to put them at 2 or 3, I don't really mind. And then probably after that, you'd have to put like Nebraska or Husky Stadium or Michigan Stadium at 4, 5, and 6. I think right now definitely Oregon's number 1. That's going to be hard. It's not number 1 in the sense that it's like the best looking stadium, because I prefer stadiums that fit 100,000 people, but it's the loudest and it's hard to get to because it's not like they're in the biggest city, and more importantly than that, teams have to travel usually a pretty big distance to get to Autzen. It's not like Michigan Stadium or Spartan Stadium or Ohio Stadium or Memorial Stadium for Indiana, where those are all within drivable distances. Who's Oregon going to play where it's really convenient to drive there? Like what, Oregon State? And that's not a conference game, and they're not even playing the same caliber of football. But anyway, we're talking about Oregon now, and then we'll get on out of here. Just give me a minute here. I picked Oregon to make the college football playoffs in my last record prediction video. Picked him to go 10-2, reach the playoffs, probably as a road team, but also maybe a home team, given their brand, their talent, their coaching, the fact that in the 10 wins I projected, I thought they were going to blow most of those teams out, or certainly look like the better team. And then I said they'd lose to an inferior opponent, whether one of those weird travel games or Indiana or maybe USC at home, and then that they'd lose to Penn State. Well, I've changed a little bit here. The Oregon Ducks, I think, have one of the brightest futures in the Big Ten in college football, and I think that this was revealed last season and probably even the season before that, just by how Lanning has recruited, developed. He's won more games every year than the year prior. Now, that will be hard to replicate this year, winning 14 games while returning less than half of your 2024 production, and much of your two deep is made up of freshmen and true freshmen and sophomores. You don't have a lot of seniors, don't even have a lot of juniors. So it's going to be interesting seeing how Lanning and his staff put this all together. But nonetheless, they went 13-1, 9-0. It feels like everyone has forgotten about them after that Rose Bowl. And I feel like they're criminally underrated. I mean, just the other day I saw that CBS released a ranking, they said power ranking, not a end of season record prediction, just a straight up ranking of who they think would be better on a neutral field. And they ranked Illinois ahead of Oregon. That is just insane. It's insane. It's beyond bonkers. I mean, when I look at Oregon right here, right now, they are plus plus 340 to win the Big Ten. Illinois is plus 4,200, tied with Indiana. Oregon is minus 230 to reach the playoffs. Illinois is in the plus 500s, guys. And their strength of schedule rank per FPI is 25th. Their win total is 10.5. Illinois is 8-5, heavily juiced to the under. Oregon's is just slightly juiced to the under. It's not even close, guys. I will tell you right now, if Oregon played Illinois again at home, it looked the same as it did last year, unless it was very early in the year, so in the month of September, when Illinois' experience could compensate a little bit for Oregon's talent superiority without the same experience. If they played again in October or November, it'd be the exact same as last year. Oregon would destroy them. It'd be obvious from the jump who the better team is. And they're going to be doing that to a lot of these teams this season, especially in Autzen. I've said before, they have a lot of trap games. So looking at this schedule for Oregon, Week 1's Montana State, Week 2's Oklahoma State, Week 3 they play at Northwestern. I don't think at Northwestern's a trap game. It does, though, begin this travel series that is going to wear on this team, even though they are very talented and I love their coaching staff. Week 4 they host Oregon State in the Civil War. Hopefully one day Oregon State can get back to being good so that this rivalry, I think, can matter. Because as of right now, it looks like it's going to be pretty dead. Either maybe they don't play eventually. I don't know how long the scheduling agreement for that goes. Or it continues, but it's a guaranteed L for Oregon State basically every season. Just because of the differences of the teams now and where they're at. But Week 5, they play at Penn State. So now you've traveled to Chicago and then back. Now you're traveling to basically the same distance as Philadelphia. Happy Valley's far away from Philadelphia, but it's a similar distance in mileage, and it's harder to get to than Philadelphia. So you're traveling there. Then Week 6 you get a bye, which is helpful, because then Week 7 you play Indiana at home. That's not going to be an easy task, but Oregon is the better team. Then you travel to Piscataway. You travel even further out to New Jersey, to very close to New York City, at Rutgers in Week 8. You host Wisconsin Week 9, then you get a bye in Week 10. Then you have to travel to Iowa in Week 11. Then you host Minnesota Week 12, USC Week 13. Then you have to travel to Washington, which is not nearly as far of a distance, but it's going to be a much harder place to play than any of the other road games except for Penn State on the road. And Washington, I imagine by the end of the year, is going to be good enough to maybe cause some problems for the Ducks. That's a hard travel schedule. It is. Now, I think the Big Ten did a bit of a kindness to where none of those long road trips outside of Northwestern Week 3 and Penn State in Week 5 are separated by fewer than 2 weeks. So that's good. But that's still going to wear on this team a little bit. And I think that was part of the reason I factored in 10-2, but more importantly is just how young the team is. And I think that they are going to start off. It would not shock me if they started the year off not being a top 10 caliber team, which is kind of how they started off the year last year. The way they played against Boise State and how they played against Idaho was not indicative of a top 10 team. It wasn't. I mean, even FPI kicked them out of the top 10 temporarily. And then I think by week 3 or 4, they were right back in there. This is a team that is going to be young. I imagine against Montana State and Oklahoma State, given how Lanning has handled the game against Idaho last year, even Boise State, just how he was patient letting the offensive line and those players who were injured recover. I would not be shocked if there are any injuries or players that he wants to play just aren't ready yet, if he takes those games as sort of what they are, where they should be guaranteed wins, so you don't need to play your best ball to win those. Wouldn't be shocked if they started off slow. And if maybe that period, because of the lack of experience, extended into the entire month of September, or even parts of October. Or maybe it would just be the first 2 weeks of September again, or maybe they don't start off slow at all. Nothing's certain. And I like quarterback. I'm a fan of Dante Moore. I think he'll be a top 15 quarterback nationally. I like Mackay Hughes. I think he's going to be an All-American running back. The starting offensive line's very, very good. It's an elite starting offensive line. I think it'll be top 10. There are concerns there, though, for me when it comes to depth. I think that the Big Ten on the offensive line this year, unless your name's really Penn State, you have a lot of questionable depth. A lot of questionable depth, unless your name is Penn Penn State. I think Ohio State has some. I think Oregon has some. The starters for Oregon and the starters for Penn State, I think will have some comparability. I think those are going to be the two best starting O-lines in the Big Ten, and I think that Indiana, Iowa, and maybe Rutgers can compete for that. But you get more into the weeds, and Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State just have more depth than your Illinois, Iowa, and Rutgers do there. That's especially important on the O-line where injuries are common. Michigan does, and I think Michigan actually might even have more depth on the O-line than Oregon and Ohio State, but they do not have the proven starters, certainly compared to Oregon. And then Penn State, I think, is in a tier of their own in terms of offensive line play, which is part of the reason why I have Oregon improving their record. I have them going 11-1 regular season instead of 10-2 like I did, but I don't have them going 12-0 because I believe Penn State is going to be that much better at a variety of positions, at a majority of positions, especially in September. Come November, we can have a different discussion where I think Brycen Moore will be so good that he might be a more valuable asset than Penn State's three best wide receivers. But even for Jeremiah Smith, it took time for him to clearly become the best player in college football, even when he was balling out in September and October. It took a little bit of time there. It became very evident in the playoffs, if you remember. Very, very evident. I think that quarterback could be in conversation there. I would not be shocked if Oregon had better starting offensive tackles. Wouldn't be shocked there at all. I would not be shocked if at the end of the year, if everything pans out with Bear Alexander, that Oregon maybe has better depth at D tackle than Penn State does. But in week 5, September 27th of 2025, in the fall, where it's not snowing yet, and you've only played 4 games entering this one, I do not like where Oregon stands there. I just don't. Returning 43% of their production, they have to travel out to Happy Valley, and that's the whiteout. This is not a big noon kickoff, and nor should it be with Oregon. It'd be a 9 a.m. kickoff for Oregon, which that might be more of an advantage for Penn State than playing in the whiteout there. But it's going to be a really tough, intimidating environment. It's going to be the loudest environment that Oregon has played at under Lanning in over a year. I mean, no other environment has been that crazy and that amped up since probably 2023 when they traveled to play the Washington Huskies on the road. This team can go 12-0, and I think it's realistic because of the questions that Penn State has potentially at wide receiver, potentially at quarterback in big games, and just James Franklin in big games. And Lanning also showed last year that playing Penn State and Ohio State in the regular season, two teams that per FPI were better than Oregon, and beating them both, that he can coach well in a big game. I think he's proven that as of last season. And it's a realistic ceiling, but you also have, I think, a realistic floor of, 8-4, if I'm being honest with you. They could lose to Penn State, and then they could lose in an upset fashion to Rutgers. And then if you're telling me they couldn't lose to Washington, they can, if Washington pans out at QB and Oregon doesn't. And USC will not be an easy task, nor with Iowa on the road. That is if everything goes absolutely bad, but I think given the youth and given the inexperience, and also the fact that they have some older pieces, so Lupoy at staff has been there for a while, and Moore at QB has been there for now 2 years and played at UCLA. They have pieces, though, that though they are talented and they're not proven to be awful, if things just don't pan out, I think things could go south. Not picking it to happen. Again, I'm picking them to go 11-1, and then I think that they'll be in a tiebreaker. They'll be tied for second, not straight up second place, but they'll be tied there, but get the tiebreaker. I have Michigan going 10-2, 8-1. I'm not changing that, but I think that Oregon will get the nod over Michigan due to their opponents having, on average, more conference wins than Michigan's average opponent, and therefore they'll get the nod to go to Indy. They'll be the Big Ten runner-up, where they will once again play Penn State, once again lose that game, and they'll get a home game for sure in the college football playoff. Now looking at just some other predictions that I have for the Ducks. On the Scoville scale, Oregon, I think their offensive line will reload and be a top 10 unit in 2025. Now, depth-wise, they didn't have a lot there last year. They just did not. But they were healthy for much of the year and when it mattered. That is not a guarantee at all, but I think they're starting offensive line and offensive line overall, because unless your offensive line is injured, the starters are mostly what matter. You don't rotate on the offensive line unless you absolutely have to. I think it'll reload and be a top 10 unit in 2025, and I don't think this is very bold at all, looking at their starters. Now, if they get hurt, things change very, very, very quickly, but that's for most of the Big Ten. I mean, if Penn State loses one of their tackles, I think they can basically go on exactly the same because they're so deep there. To a lesser degree on the interior, but I still think they're pretty deep there as well. Penn State is the exception to the rule, though, with offensive line recruiting, because over 2/3 of their offensive line are 4-star and 5-star players, and I think about half of them are like higher level 4-star, 5-star players. So guys that flirted with being a 5-star at one point, or at least flirted with being a top 100 player if they're not a top 100 or 5-star player. They're an exception to the rule. It's the same thing with Alabama type depth. Texas type depth, I think, is more so developmental than just the amount of blue chippers they have there. And I would also say Georgia's in that category. Miami, I'd put in that category. I'd probably put Florida in that category, given how old and big they are there. But very few teams have good offensive line depth right now, especially with the portal. And I think there's been more of an emphasis due to a reaction of the spread offense. And this is kind of a lagging indicator. A lot of teams have focused more on wide receivers. A lot of camps, a lot of trainers have focused on wide receivers, especially since I think there's a different type of personality with an offensive lineman and wide receiver. So now you can find good receivers in abundance. You can't find good offensive linemen in abundance. So any depth concerns about Oregon, I'm just tabling those on the offensive line until an injury shows up. Medium prediction. At the end of 2025, Oregon will be almost as good as they were in 24, and they'll also go to Indy. So I'm not picking them to entirely reload. I think that if everything were to pan out, this team is a higher ceiling than it did last year, just not by virtue of the fact that Moore is a higher ceiling than Gabriel. They return Mateo Uyunglele and Tatum Tuioti. Betcher is a walk-on, but they have some talented linebackers who will play alongside of him. And in the secondary last year, most of those guys were around 5'10", 5'11", maybe one or a few of them were 6 foot. But this new secondary should be taller, and they are Lanning's guys, like only developed and recruited by him for the most part, outside of Dylan Thieneman and Theron Johnson, who've played in the Big Ten. Oregon's relying on the portal less and less. That's because they trust their talent and development more than they ever have. So consequently, I think this team has a higher ceiling than last year's team did. However, they also have a lower floor. So kind of averaging those two out leads me to think that this team will come close to reloading, but not quite. They'll still go to Indy, though. My hot prediction is that the Ducks will have multiple freshmen play on defense at a high level. This is redshirt freshmen or true freshmen. I think that Naeem Offord will play. I think that Trey McNutt will play. I think that Elijah Rushing will play for Oregon. Absolutely love what he could bring to the defensive line. They may have the deepest defensive end group in America. If you look at their two deep, they could. If you go deeper than that, probably not. But then again, how deep is any position in college football right now if you're looking at their three deep? Just be honest. I think that right now, Ife Obadegwu, yeah, that's how you say his name. I think Ife Obadegwu will perform at a high level. I think that he will be in the rotation for sure. And then they return Jalil Florence, who did he recover from an injury? Yeah, I think he recovered from an injury. Right now he's projected to start at field side cornerback. He's not a freshman, but still it's just something that I wasn't aware of. I, for whatever reason, expected it to be Theron Johnson and Ife Obadegwu who were going to start, but I guess Florence was hurt. My apologies to any Oregon fan if you're shocked or disappointed that I didn't know that. Hard to follow every player. I also think that, Braden Platt could have some playing time. Aaron Flowers could have playing time. Kingston Lopa is a redshirt freshman projected to start at free safety. So they'll have multiple freshmen play on defense at a high level. My scorching prediction is that Oregon will lose to Penn State. I'm still holding on to this, even though I think Oregon will win an additional game more than I thought a month ago, and I think they're a little bit better than I thought a month ago. I think Penn State is they're going to manhandle Oregon just that early. But I think by the end of the year, Oregon will be good enough to manhandle a team in USC that I'm very high on. I think Oregon in November, especially in December, is going to be a different team and a better team than they were in the month of September. And they could avenge Penn State and Indy. It'll be a neutral field game. Oregon will catch up to their potential more than Penn State will, because Penn State's going to start the year kind of playing closer to their potential with more experience. And then my Hellfire prediction is that Dante Moore will have 1,000 or more receiving yards and be better than Ryan Williams. Not just the Ryan Williams of last year, could even be better than the Ryan Williams of this year. He's going to be absolutely amazing. Amazing true freshman. And look, this young Oregon team I think is going to be really damn good. They're going to be one of the top 5 teams in college football this year when it's all said and done. Will they start off that high? I don't think so. There's a variety of teams who I think will start better than Oregon. I think that Alabama will. I believe that Ohio State will start off better. I think there is a chance that even a team like Indiana could start. Like week 1 Indiana could be better than week 1 Oregon. But I think that by the time they play, that won't be the case. For example, I think that this team will improve throughout the year pretty rapidly. And they'll finish as one of the 5 best teams in all of America. Okay. We're done here. We are done. And that's just as we're getting peak concurrent viewers, probably because they liked how I was talking about Oregon. A Trojan Fight says he can't see a 10-2 team miss the playoffs. And I get that. I do. But it's Indiana. They're a smaller brand. I think there are going to be more than 10-2 teams, or around 10 of them, probably more, who would be playoff contenders. And that plus the brand and the fact that I think Oregon and Penn State beat them by double digits leads me to think the committee would snub them after how they played last season. Okay, thank you guys so much for tuning in. These videos will be out tomorrow, the Oregon, Indiana, and Alabama ones. We'll be live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time yet again. We'll be live then. And we'll have a lot more to talk about and a better show. So thank you for tuning into this one. I'll see you tomorrow again at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll also see you Tuesday. Well, Tuesday is tomorrow. That's how off my schedule is, guys. That's why I didn't go live tomorrow. Is that out of it. Or live yesterday. We'll also go live Wednesdays, of course, for the Withdrawal Wednesdays, where I have 5 or 6 viewer questions I want to answer. And then I will get to Thursday, which will be our final stream of the week, and they will all be good ones. So you'll want to tune in. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, hit the notification bell, do all of those things, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a great day. See you soon. No super chats.